much for being here. Karen's schedule is a schedule that I wish on nobody. It's tough, and I periodically get emails from her staff member who's trying to squeeze in even the smallest amount of time. And I know you're recovering for some surgery, but I think you are on a treadmill 24 hours a day in trying to meet all of your commitments, not just to your local constituents, but to your statewide constituents. So on behalf of all of us, I am absolutely delighted that you're here this evening to give us a little bit of an update on what's happened and what you think might happen.
Okay.
And happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah to everybody else. I just left the State House Hanukkah lighting ceremony. Thank you for inviting me here today, and I thank everybody for being here. It's great to look out and see all of you hardcore Dems that are the foundation of the Democratic Party across the state, not only across here, but across the state. So thank you, and it's always a pleasure to be with my two House colleagues, Jeff and Brian, who are great to work with, and I think all of you know are terrific advocates for the Metro West and for the state, for all of the areas and the issues that are important to us. They fight really hard and successfully fight for the issues in the House, so that we actually have I believe a great team in the Metro West, and I feel very lucky to be supported with folks like Jeff and Brian. So thank you so much. Thank you. And I hope all of you know Mary Ann stood up and introduced herself. She is a Medway resident, which I think is great. But she's also my chief of staff. And we've been working together since 2005. And before that, she worked for the prior state senator, Senator Dave Magnani. So she has a tremendous wealth of history and knowledge, and background and experience, and we have a lot of fun together. So we try to get a lot done. So thank you. I'll speak for a little while, and then maybe answer questions if anybody has anything. I tend to be informal, so if I'm speaking, there's a burning question that you have, feel free to ask. For those that may not know me, I'll just start out by saying I started out as a social worker, and that's sort of the way I look at my role still as a legislator. As a social worker, my job was helping people. I worked with kids and families, counseling them and working with them, and I still feel that is the heart and soul of what I do as a state senator, whether it be one-on-one with constituents, helping them with their issues, or advocacy groups, or passing laws to help improve the quality of life of people. But that, to me, is what a state legislator does. It simply helps people. And I still love what I do. I never planned on staying this long. In fact, I can tell you, when I first came to the legislature, and you guys may have heard this too, you hear people say, oh, I've been here 15 years or 20 years, or even more. And I honestly thought, my God, how does somebody stay that long? And it amazes me when I realize I've been in the legislature now since late 2001, 2002. I mean, the time has flown by. Not only every session, every year, every month is so different. And I still feel like I'm learning a lot, and I still feel like there's a lot of work to do. So that's very exciting. And I think we did a lot this session. We had a lot of successes. There's still a lot, though, that we need to build on. We did some major criminal justice reform. We did pass my paid family and medical leave bill, which I had been filing since 2006. That's finally the law. We raised the minimum wage it'll eventually be 15 in the Commonwealth, and help a lot of working families and people in raising their income. We did do some that, climate change and some other labor issues, and we but we did do a lot, as you know, and I hear from people that some of the stuff still ended up on the table, that we still will be working towards. I'm hoping that we in the legislature early on can focus on education and healthcare reform. I know in the House, Jeff put a lot of time and energy and a lot of his skin in the game there in the healthcare reform bill. It was close, but we just didn't quite get that through in the final bit. That's something that I feel we need to redouble our efforts. It did cost containment. The governor had filed to save a lot of money by knocking about 140,000 people off Medicaid. That's something that we in the Senate and the House could not agree upon. We were the first state to increase the roles in mass health and make sure that we have almost universal health care. I did not want us to be the first state to cut people off as well, just to save money. That's not the way to go. So I believe that will be our philosophy. We'll take another look. I'm hoping again that we can get something done the first year of the session in the House, hopefully too, so that we can pass something sooner rather than later to really help bend the curve for the increasing cost of health care. Education reform was another area that I'm hoping that we can do something sooner. It's something that I think many of you know. The Foundation Budget Review Commission came out with its recommendations. That was the springboard that I originally ran for the legislature to change the funding formula, particularly for the Metro West communities. We've made some improvements. There still are some areas that we just don't adequately address in the quote adequacy, and Bev, Bev has worked on this a lot too. The areas of equity we worked on in the earlier 2000s and other areas, but adequacy, what does it truly take to offer each child, no matter where they lived, an adequate, it should be quality, but at least an adequate education as our Constitution requires. And we weren't funding it. The education has changed so much since the 1993 original ed reform. For example, the current system does not take health insurance into account. We all know school districts are spending so much money on health insurance. We may not pay for the state the whole thing, but we should be contributing, as well as ELL and some other areas, more for special education, low income, and others. So we've tried to slowly implement some of the pieces. If you remember, back in '93, for those that may have been involved at the time, there was a 7-year phase-in, and that occurred. Times were good in the 90s. It was easy to phase it in. And then in 2006-07, when we did the next phase of ed reform, we had a long phase-in, and then we hit the recession, and that really stagnated it for a bit. But we finally, this last year, have implemented all of that phase of ed reform, so that now we need to focus on the new issues that the Foundation Budget Review Commission has put forth. So I'm hoping that we can do that this year as well, and again, benefit every child. They are our future. It is the education. And there's other aspects of education, focusing on early ed and then higher ed for folks that are important. Climate change is an area that I think that we will be tackling certain areas again, just like the opioid epidemic. Unfortunately, that's an epidemic that is still strong. We are beginning to bend the curve there, but I'd like to add to that mental health issues. We haven't fully targeted mental illness, and I would like to, that's an issue that's personal for me. My father had mental illness, and I'd like to try to, for the state, for Massachusetts, to be the state that leads the nation in getting rid of the stigma. I think that would be great. We have great minds. We have people that can come up with this, and also finally figure out a way to have parity in insurance for mental health as we do in the other aspects of healthcare. So those are things that I think are on the horizon. Transportation is another area. We have not focused on transportation, I believe, in the way that we should have and need to. I've already started with a working group as Senate President to sort of begin to set the table, to start hearing from people. I don't have the answers. I don't know if any one person or group does, but we need to really focus on this, be creative, think of out-of-the-box solutions as to ways to improve our transportation infrastructure, our roads, bridges, trains, RTAs, bike lanes. I mean, every aspect of transportation. I don't go to a single meeting. I got here late, I'm sorry. But generally, when I go to any meeting, any time of the day, anywhere across the state, the first 10, 15 minutes, people are talking about how long it took to get to where they are. It's just impossible to get almost anywhere in the state without gridlock. And if we are going to remain a vibrant, strong state with an incredibly wonderful quality of life, we need to tackle our transportation and infrastructure problems and issues. So that's something that I look forward to working with the House and the governor now, but really focusing on transportations. So those are some of the big issues that I see coming up. As a Senate, I'm excited about being Senate President. It hasn't. Thank you. It hasn't sunken in fully yet. Thanks. Thank you. We'll be starting a new session, 2-year session in January. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for all your hard work in this last election cycle. It's because of you that overall, except for the governor's office, but overall, we had a phenomenal year in the Senate. We're adding another Democratic senator. I want to thank you for all of that. In the House, we helped to get these great guys reelected as well, and other terrific Democrats. So again, Massachusetts is a beacon of what it could be like across the country. And that's one thing that I just want to say. I really believe strongly that Massachusetts has been a leader for our country on so many issues. Starting with the revolution, we were the leader. When you look at so many of the issues that we've come forward with gay marriage, with healthcare, with climate and green energy and veterans benefits and more, we need to take that mantle and ensure that we stay the leader with bold proposals and bold initiatives and policy and in our actions. And that to me is very exciting, and wanting to accomplish a lot in climate change and transportation and labor and workforce and education and other things. I think it's really important because we have all these other states nipping at our heels to take that away from us. And I think that we need to just make sure that we have it here. We are the center of innovation and excellence, and I believe we're the best state in the nation. So it's very exciting to me to be the Senate President, to help working with all of my colleagues in the Senate, to be leading the Senate forward at a very exciting time right now, and working with the Speaker and the House and all of its members. So I thank you. If anybody has any terrific ideas on any of the issues that I've talked about, feel free to send it to my office, call Mary Ann, call me, and we can work with you. But again, I don't have the answers. I'll be the first to acknowledge I don't. And I think it's again a very exciting time. So I thank all of you. I'm certainly willing to answer questions if anybody has specific questions, but I could go on and on if you let me know that. Paul?
I do have a specific question. And surprise, surprise, it relates to housing.
Yeah, that's the other area that we need to do, yes.
And I know, and I had the opportunity to talk with Jeff and Brian about this earlier this evening, that one member of the House has held up a bill under the House rules that would have created the opportunity for more housing, multifamily housing and more dense housing, cluster developments, not 40B, we're just talking about market
Right, I know
rate.
what you mean.
And I'm wondering how quickly, and I know quickly and legislation are oxymorons, but how quickly do you think the legislature can pass something similar to what obviously now will fail in this session?
You know, again, I think that I'm hoping that we can do it the first year of the session. I think that there are concerns about just passing that bill. As many of you know, we in the legislature, even if it's a very big issue, we focus on it, we work hard, and we can put out a terrific bill and pass it and get the governor to sign it. But once that's done, often it's like, okay, we move on to the next topic and we give time for that bill to be implemented and see how it works. So there are some people, I think, in the House and the Senate that are concerned. The bill that Paul is talking about is proposed by the governor to lower the threshold of some of these zoning issues from 2/3 to just a simple majority. And there are people that are concerned if we do that, we won't take up some other housing-related issues. So at least let's do a little bit more. And when you start talking about that, that's when you get into potentially what might be considered controversial issues, where in the House or the Senate at this point in the session, if one person objects in either the House when they're doing their session or the Senate when we're doing ours, we cannot do the bill. We have to wait for the next session, and if you remember, the first Wednesday, which is January 2nd, is the swearing-in day. The bills are due to be filed by the members in both the House and the Senate the third Wednesday in January. If there are other bills that are filed after, they're just considered late file bills, and it's not that big a deal, but most bills are filed by the third Wednesday. And that can be somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 bills every session. So it's a lot of bills, it's a lot of work, and then they get divvied up by the House clerk and the Senate clerk to go to the different committees once the committees are established, and then they start holding their hearings. So if there is a will for the House and Senate to do something sooner, we could have the hearing by March and reporting it out and getting it done earlier. So it's possible.
So first a message from Becca Rausch. I had an email correspondence with her. She said she's in Washington for a state legislators innovation program, and she just asked me to extend her regards to you and to everybody here. And now a question.
Thank you.
Question 2 on the November ballot calls for the formation of a commission of which the Senate chair is supposed to appoint 3 of the members, and the House Speaker also appoints 3 members. Do you have any insight as to what the Senate President is thinking about how she will decide who to appoint as members of the commission?
Not yet. One thing I've learned as Senate President, there are hundreds and hundreds of committee appointments and things like that. So I would sit down with my staff and figure out exactly what the criteria and requirements are. If it's 3, I assume 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, but maybe not. I don't know. But often that's what happened. So, Mary Ann may know.
We have, since the election, started to get some inquiries about the commission, and then people who have been contacted the office, we've asked them to please submit a statement of interest and a statement of their qualifications and why they would like to be on this commission, as well as a resume. We're meeting with people who, advocacy groups who helped formulate the question, will be meeting with us this week and next. And we'll then meet with the Senate President and go over, the people that have contacted us, and then we'll start, as the Senate President said, establishing the criteria that she will use to choose appointees.
I'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
This is more in the category of a suggestion, and it goes to all three of you, and especially you, Mary Ann, because I know you can make things happen. And I always look at Massachusetts and realize the tremendous resources we have in higher education, and both at the undergraduate and graduate professional school levels. And then I also look at the tremendous number of projects, some very specific and tangible, and some broader and more open-ended. And I've always felt as if there is a total mismatch between the resources that are available in higher education. For example, all students have to do projects at some point in time, and the scope of some of these projects is huge. And sometimes the outcome of those projects is simply to meet an academic requirement. It doesn't have a practical application, or if it has a practical application, that never is matched with a real life need. Transportation might be a good example with all the technology and all the engineering resources that we have. So it's not I always feel as if that's a lost opportunity. And I don't know how it could be utilized more strategically to help legislatures have resources and information and data to help accomplish a goal. And I recognize that it would be very complex because of academic requirements and the legislature procedures. But I still think it's a resource that, especially here in Massachusetts, knowing how huge higher education is.
Right.
That could
We
be
have relied
utilized.
upon students for different things over the years, but probably not as much as we could or should, but we could take a look at that.
It's just a suggestion.
Okay.
When you
Thank
ask
you.
for some
Thanks.
out-of-the-box ideas, it's
Right.
not a brand new thought, but sometimes you can bring it full circle, and perhaps it could help address some of the challenges.
No,
that we
that's great.
face.
Thank you. Well, thanks. Yep.
Karen, what more can the state do to mediate global climate change that doesn't depend on leadership or a mandate from Washington? Because we're not going to get either of those.
Right. I think that there were some things that we can do that were left on the table from this last session that we could revisit again to keep moving forward. Looking at what some of what other states are doing can be helpful. Not all the time, though. The climate is different in the other states. I mean, what California is doing may or may not apply well to Massachusetts. But I think that anything and everything needs to be looked at. But I'm glad that we have increased our reliance on offshore wind. That was something that I've advocated for a lot, and other more sustainable forms of energy. We can probably do more still with solar and some other things. But I think that by us going back to first looking at what was left on the table from this year, and then what have other states done since this last couple of years as well to add to that. So I think that there's a lot we could do. It certainly would be better if the federal government would acknowledge climate change, but we're not going to probably get that. Yep.
You've talked about huge legislation, transportation, education. Is there any thought to increasing taxes, any way to get more money into the system so we can actually afford a better transportation system?
Well, I think that I would like to see us take a look at the millionaire's tax again, and do it in a way that is constitutional. I think that is something that has a good chance in passing. If we do that, I'm not certain what other possibilities, and I would need to work with the House, Texas House. If it comes through the legislature, it has to originate in the
Oh,
House.
that's right, yeah.
So, there's that, but we'll see. Yep.
What's the anticipation of the revenue from the marijuana sales? Is that an avenue that you might get going, tapped into, and how would it be used?
We did anticipate about 65 million or 75 million for this year, and I think it could surpass that.
If they did it in a weekend.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, ask the residents of the towns. But there is the feeling like that may back off a little bit over time, but,
Saving for the addiction that's coming.
Is it targeted specific, I mean, what's the anticipated use for that money?
yeah, when we passed the bill, we have some things for education, for self-sustaining, the Cannabis Control Commission, police, fire, public safety, and other areas. It has to be appropriated, I think, through the legislature, if I remember, but we set forth specific areas for local aid, et cetera. Yeah. Yep.
On that, I have a separate question, but on that last topic, I hope that there's long-term planning for the anticipated addiction piece of the marijuana cannabis conversion to
Right.
high THC products.
Right, we did include some for addiction, we did do that for the cannabis as well as for gaming. We plugged a lot more money knowing that with gaming in Massachusetts, the addiction would go up.
So my question actually, I wanted to ask about the MBTA access, especially in Metro West, the costs of the Mass Pike. So we've recently been using it. I got really hit recently because I use it now on a regular basis. But I noticed that the parking lot in Ashland is full by maybe mid-morning. There is not adequate parking, and we're standing room only when I get on the train, and it's a huge train at 7:30 in the morning. I mean, huge. But we get on and we stand. So can you comment on how the services that actually Metro West is getting in terms of the mass transit?
Well, as you know, we have the commuter rail for many of our communities, not all. We need to, I'm a firm believer in public transportation. We should be having more. We need to increase the number of trains. We need to offset that. There's also, for my district, I do need to point out that there's some at-grade crossings for Framingham and Ashland, Framingham in particular, where if we start adding a lot more trains without mitigating some of that, then it's going to paralyze downtown Framingham as well because of the at-grade crossing. And Ashland has it some, not as intense. So this was actually an issue that I raised today in leadership every Monday. Senate President, Speaker, and Governor meet to talk about issues, and one thing that I asked for was a briefing coming up from Secretary of Transportation Pollack about what is planned for that Alston-Brighton area where they want to straighten out, now that the old Beacon Yard or that freight yard is closed down, they want to straighten out the pike. Is it going to be elevated? Is it going to be on the ground? And how are they going to do that? When is that going to take place? Are they going to block off a full lane of the pike? I know for me, it takes an hour and a half at least regularly, if not some days more, each way. So what kind of mitigation would there be? Are they hoping to increase the trains, in which case you have the at-grade crossing issue? So I want to know more. I know in some ways the train has gotten more reliable and it's a little bit better, but I know it is crowded and it's crowded fairly early. So and all of the trains. I mean, I'm most familiar with the, Boston, Framingham, Worcester line, but I know the Franklin line gets crowded. All of the ones to deal with Metro West. So again, this is why I started out by saying that we haven't had a real plan for transportation of the infrastructure and updating it and improving it. And it's really an important issue, not only for economic development, but for quality of life for all of us as well, so.
Karen, I was at a workshop with Secretary Pollock concerning South Coast Rail. And I specifically asked her, where is the equipment coming from? And her response was they have enough equipment to expand the South Coast Rail project. And my understanding is there's not enough equipment now to meet capacity demands for the existing service. The reason I'm sharing that with you is when you do have a meeting with her, you may want to ask her how they are going to service a brand new line, which is an important line. It's important for the whole Commonwealth. But where are the locomotives and where are the passenger cars coming from? Because she said at a public meeting that they have enough equipment, and reality says to me they don't.
Okay. It's good to know.
I would agree with that, because it's very obvious that the cars that I get on are pretty old seats. But I want to mention, they stopped collecting fares this morning. I didn't pay to go in. And I wondered, where can I put my donation? Because I didn't pay because they didn't collect. It was too crowded.
Right.
And they missed
They
it.
are looking into ways, because I have raised that several times already, looking into ways that people pay before they get on, so that they don't have to come and go down the aisles to collect, as they sometimes don't. Yeah.
I can tell you on the Green Line, on baseball game days, that the majority of the passengers don't pay because they don't have an appropriate fare collection system. And the operators, to their credit, would rather get the people in rather than making them go through a system which, in order to get on the train, would delay each of those trains at each stop, probably 10 or 15 minutes.
Should have the governor ride the train.
But just a way, I think a small percentage of people would do it, but just a way for people who choose to be able to pay the fare, even if it's not collected. Even if it was just a link on the website that says, were you not able to pay your fare, pay it here. It couldn't cost that much. It might not bring in that much, but give people that opportunity.
Speaking of fares, what's being done with the toll evaders on the Mass Pike from out of state that you can't go after? Like, you know, we're sending them a bill now and you're not getting paid. I know we can go to New Hampshire and dock their registrations, but on multiple other states we can't do anything. What's being done in order to, you know, start collecting the fares, the tolls?
Honestly, I don't know. I'd have to ask to find out what they're doing. I don't know if there's reciprocity that they can collect it like they do. If there's some way to do it. There's some states that we can do it.
Right.
But you know, if somebody comes from Texas, say, I don't know what.
And they get a bill for $1, or, you know,
Right.
well, you probably got $6. They're not going to pay it.
How much is that problem worth? I mean,
It's in the millions of dollars right now.
They're not, but if they get pulled over by the police, they're not entitled to drive in Massachusetts. Once they've been through all of the non-payment phases that they go through, the police will actually, I don't know if they'll pick them up, take them out of the car for $6, but you lose your right to operate in the state if you don't pay.
If they catch you again.
If you're from out of state, right. If you're never coming back from Texas again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Most people, they may not. But, yeah.
That probably wouldn't apply to rental cars, right? I mean, if you are.
Rental companies will bill you. They
Right,
will
they'll go after you.
They put it on your credit card automatically. They didn't even ask you. They just do it.
Right.
It's, you sign that, you
Right.
sign that form and it says we have the right to bill you for it.
Right. Right.
But rental cars oftentimes have out-of-state plates, that's why I was curious. If you can't do it for an out-of-state person, you can't do it for an out-of-state rental car.
think you can.
No, you can, it's easier actually for a rental car than it would be for a private.
They send the bill
Because the
to
rental
Hertz,
car's
Hertz pays
company
it.
is gonna pay it, and then they'll bill you for it on your charge, yeah. Well, Chris?
Yeah, on the transportation note, I still look back at the Jay Gonzalez ad when he was riding the T. If it were me, I mean, I would be like on the platform waiting the T because it got delayed and having the readout say, oh, your train's been delayed, stay tuned for more info. This is something that we should be attacking the governor about and really going after him along with other issues that he's not very big on and take back the corner office. And I think we need to get aggressive, and I was wondering what other ideas you have that we can really work together to get a Democrat in the corner office next time around.
Well, we have a little under 4 years. I think we have a lot of time to put a lot of our great minds together and organize and work with the state party and to push for that. But I think that would help too in 4 years from now.
Norma?
That brings up my regular question. What are the prospects of moving the primary election to the spring instead of in September, so that we don't have this mad dash from September to the beginning of November?
It's something I think it's certainly worth taking a look at and looking at the pros and cons and talking to people more about it. Because it condenses the time after the primary to a very short period of time, and it makes it harder in a lot of ways for people.
Right, once you have the names of the primary winners, then you start printing signs or literature and everything gets delayed and you end up with almost no time.
Right.
From the perspective of being in the campaign office, it's really challenging.
One last comment, and I'm gonna take it myself, and that is the Mass Save program literally has billions of dollars. Last I was told was over $6 billion. And if the Commonwealth of Massachusetts really wants to encourage energy conservation to remain number one, which I would like us to do, I would strongly encourage a relook at the whole funding mechanism, number one, but also, number two, how the money is actually not being spent and how it could be spent so that consumers are in a better position to increase the energy efficiency of their home, either through outright grants or no-interest loans. Right now, the only program is a no-interest loan for 10 years for heating systems, and there's many other ways to increase energy efficiency.
Right. If there truly is $6 billion, it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Check into it. You can check into it.
So, thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody.